All right, let's take a look. Now, I ain't got a PhD, Dan, but I have the Holy Spirit and the Bible, and it's about to make you look really foolish. Now, let's go look.
All right, let's see it.
Okay, Dan the man, let's go look at Jude. In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah, you remember them cities you were talking about? And the surrounding towns gave themselves up to what? Pride and inhospitality? No. Gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. They serve as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. Sodom and Gomorrah, sexual immorality and perversion. Now let's go see what the perversion is.
So perversion is a bad translation of the Greek there. As I pointed out in the previous video, the Greek sarkos heteras means literally other flesh, and this is a reference to humans seeking out sexual intercourse with angelic beings. We have references in the verse before and in the verse after to relationships between humans and angels, and as I pointed out in my previous video, this was something that was being debated at the time.
Let's go see. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed indecent acts with who? Other men, and received in themselves the due penalty for their, what's that word? Perversion, Dan.
So perversion is also an awful translation here, but the Greek is not sarkos heteras. The Greek is plani, which is a word that means error, refers to wandering from the path or departing from the truth. So in the Greek, there's absolutely no relationship whatsoever between Jude 1:7 and Romans 1:27. The relationship is an illusion caused by two bad translations of these Greek terms. And so it's only in English that we see a link between these two passages, and that is an artificial one. There's absolutely no relationship in the Greek.
Now, I'm sure you'll bring up Ezekiel, which we can do. Here, let's just go look. Right here in Ezekiel. Now, this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy, of course, but is that all? No. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. Therefore, I did away with them, as you have seen. Samaria did not commit half the sins that you did. Clearly, it's not just about not helping the poor and needy.
So this is misrepresenting my video. I did not say that it is only about pride and not helping the poor and the needy. I said that was the message of Genesis 19. I also addressed how the other passages looked at Genesis 19, and in Jude and in Ezekiel, they also include either sexual sin or this word toevah, which other translations generally render abomination or abominations, and which your translation renders detestable things. Now, as I pointed out, this word occurs a number of times in this chapter, usually in reference to Jerusalem's sins, and it can refer to sexual sin. Sometimes it's a reference to adultery, sometimes it's a reference to sex work. Usually it is being used figuratively or metaphorically to refer to going after other deities in this broader metaphorical framework of Israel as the unfaithful wife to Adonai. I have already addressed all this. I have already pointed out there are no data that allow one to read same-sex intercourse directly into the use of toevah in Ezekiel 16.
Now, Dan, let's go back and look at the account of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, here's what the men of Sodom did. They called the lot. Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can do what with them, Dan? We can have sex with them. Homosexuals.
So, two things here. As I mentioned in the previous video, this was a threat of sexual assault in Genesis 19, and so this is not about sexual desire, this is about power. And so nothing in the text of Genesis 19 indicates every last man in Sodom was a homosexual, in addition to the fact that that concept of a person who is homosexual did not exist back then. Again, this is about power. This is not about sexual desire. Now, additionally, the text on the screen indicates that the men of Sodom did not know beforehand that they were angels. That's not really explicit in the text. I would agree that that's the most likely reading of Genesis 19, but that does not mean that the author of Jude would agree. The text of Jude is pretty clear. The academic consensus is that sarkos heteros is not a reference to same-sex intercourse, but precisely to humans attempting sexual intercourse with angelic beings. And so this is the academic consensus, and your attempt to read homosexuality into this text is arbitrary and capricious and is not supported by the data.
Now, a degree may make you educated, Dan, but it never stops you from being a liar and bowing down to the world. Get out of here.
So maybe you ought to reconsider some of that higher education on the Bible so that you can begin to engage it on its own terms and understand what its producers wanted it to do, rather than just deploy it as a tool in your structuring of power and in your right-wing authoritarian identity politics.